Welcome, everyone, to the Heritage Foundation, and welcome to our online viewers at heritage.org. It is an honor and a pleasure to welcome everyone to the Heritage Foundation for this event, Navigating Veteran Employment from the Battlefield to the Job Market. This event is part of the Heritage Foundation's Protect America Month. For today's post-9/11 veterans, a successful military transition to the civilian workforce carries unique challenges, but also offers some unique opportunities. The days are long gone when one associated a veteran with like the image of our grandfather from World War II or some of our fathers from the Vietnam War. Look around you. Today's veterans, 13 years after nonstop combat, look like this. Often young. Sometimes their sacrifices are visible, other times their sacrifices aren't visible. The American veteran can bring unique experience to the corporate world, and many possess leadership skills that even some of the best classrooms and some of the best business schools in the world can't teach. However, returning veterans do face an uphill battle often. One of the biggest challenges a veteran has transitioning into the civilian world is figuring out how to translate their military experience into what a civilian employer is looking for. To discuss these matters and to share some of these experiences, we have a very distinguished and gallant panel with us today. First, Pete Hegseth is the Chief Executive Officer for Concerned Veterans for America. Prior to joining CVA, Pete was the Executive Director for Vets for Freedom from 2007 to 2011. An infantry captain in the Army National Guard, Pete returned from a deployment to Afghanistan in 2012, where he was the Senior Counterinsurgency Instructor at the Counterinsurgency Training Center in Kabul. Pete also served in Iraq with the 3rd Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division for their 2005 to 2006 deployment. He also served in Guantanamo Bay for a year with his National Guard unit. Pete graduated from Princeton and has a master's in public policy at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Brian Wilson owns and operates 2 businesses in Arlington, Virginia, Potomac CrossFit and Patriot CrossFit. He is also the co-founder of CrossFit Walter Reed, the only CrossFit gym dedicated solely to training wounded warriors. Brian is a veteran Marine Corps counterintelligence and human intelligence officer with 13 years of experience in the active and reserve forces, serving in places like Bosnia, the Horn of Africa, and Iraq. As a civilian employee, he served as a human intelligence subject matter expert, supporting naval special warfare, and deployed with SEAL Team 7 and SEAL Team 10 in 2007. He is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and has a master's degree from St. John's College Graduate Institute. And he is also a topic of a very good piece on the Foundry blog, the Heritage Foundation's blog today about what he's done with his CrossFit activities. Mike Ott works as a consultant with Deloitte. He advises clients across multiple agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Energy, focusing on technology integration and systems engineering and analysis. Mike founded the Washington, D.C. chapter of Vets in Tech in 2013, focused on bringing together the tech-specific network for our veterans, providing education, entrepreneurship, and employment resources and programs here in the D.C. area. Mike served 5 years in the U.S. Navy as a nuclear surface warfare officer. While in the Navy, he served on board the USS Fitzgerald stationed in Japan and on board the USS Harry S. Truman. Finally, Lieutenant Commander Micah Murphy is participating in a Capitol Hill Fellowship program assigned to the office of Senator John McCain. At sea, Lieutenant Commander Murphy's assignments have included stints as First Lieutenant Communications Officer, Electronic Material Officer, Fire Control Officer, Operations Officer, Executive Officer, and Commanding Officer on ships that are far too numerous to list here. He is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and earned his master's in business administration from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University. I'm going to ask each panelist to speak between 5 and 10 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to questions. And it's my understanding that after the event here, there will be food and beverages outside, so you can continue the conversation, continue networking if you don't have an opportunity to ask your question here. So with that being said, I'm going to open up to our first speaker.
Well, Luke, thank you very much for the invitation to be here, and as well as the Heritage Foundation for highlighting this. I think it's an important discussion to have, and for a group like Heritage to make it a priority, which they have continually done. This is one of multiple events that Heritage has done to highlight how veterans can transition, and I think it's an honor to be here. I don't know if I can live up to distinguished and gallant, but I will attempt. And Brian, Matt, and Mike, I appreciate you all being here and the contributions you've made. I guess I'll start with a couple of principles when it comes to transition in veterans employment, as opposed to specifics, ways in which I think the intangibles that are oftentimes missed when we look at transition and how veterans can maybe miss out on some of the things their civilian peers may have coming out of college, and ways in which they either aren't employed or are not fully employed, or find themselves underemployed as opposed to fully engaged at the skill set and the level that they should be, which I think is a lot of what we see. We may see the veterans' unemployment rate coming down, but I don't think we discuss enough the underemployment of veterans who, while they can't find a job, take the first job they can find that isn't indicative of the skill sets that they have. And so once in that job, is with anyone civilian or military, it's difficult to then find that job elsewhere that fits what befitting their skill sets. There are also different challenges between active duty component and the National Guard. I've been a guardsman for most of my career, did some active duty time while deployed, but more or less my entire career has been in the National Guard. Guys in the National Guard who have steady jobs and then deploy and then come back have different challenges than someone who's been serving for a decade and then comes out of that service in a full-time capacity and attempts to find a job. I've seen great pitfalls from National Guardsmen who had a job that maybe discriminated against them or doesn't understand that service or doesn't tolerate the amount of time that they're away, either directly or covertly or silently. And then on the active duty side, you have different challenges of just sort of, you've been out of that market. You have a different set of skill sets that the civilian world doesn't understand. How do you make sure they translate, which is something you've mentioned. And I think the most powerful way that they translate is by convincing and demonstrating to employers that veterans are a value add. Veterans are not a charity. We're not asking for you to do it because you like us or you want to pat us on the back. You should hire veterans because they're going to be great workers for you who are going to add to your bottom line, who have been involved in dynamic battle places in the 21st century that require dynamic and strategic thinking. That strategic corporal is indicative of that type of person who isn't just out there walking a beat anymore. They've got to be a receiver, and they've got to digest that information, push it up to higher, and then do it all over again. So in addition to the hard skills of duty and honor and courage, it's the subtleties of the intelligence that it takes to be a warrior on the modern battlefield. And I think those things, are those subtle value adds, are difficult to translate. But I think we need to educate employers on why veterans will make them more profitable, not just you should hire vets so that you get the warm glow that comes with hiring veterans. Two subtle, kind of intangible skills that I think are underemphasized when veterans transition, and I'll highlight two private organizations that I think help with that, that I think demonstrate those type of approaches that are needed. One is a network. And we underestimate how powerful a network is. I mean, there's a networking event after this in the next room so that you can come in and talk to people and get to know folks at other positions. And because the power of a personal relationship transcends that 1,000th resume that's been sent into that random U.S. job site that someone's going to look at and judge you from. If that person knows you, trusts you, likes you, had a conversation with you, they're that much more likely to want to employ you or work with you. A network is everything, especially in a town like this, for folks that understand how important that is. The organization I would highlight is rallypoint.com. It's basically a LinkedIn for the military in many ways, and it's not a silver bullet. It's a private organization founded by a guy who went to Harvard Business School and identified that he had fallen behind in his ability to actually network because he'd been a Special Forces soldier for the last 12 years and didn't know the people that his peers did, who had either been in the private sector and then went to business school and were finding opportunities. So he said, a lot of guys in the military aren't on LinkedIn because it's not something that's emphasized. Let's create something that has value for veterans when they're in the military and then when they leave the military. So if you're joining rallypoint.com, for example, it helps you find maybe the next duty position that you might want to look for, that you had no idea that your past commander is now doing this at the Pentagon, or they're doing this over here, and if you were to be able to talk to them, they might have a position you could access. So it should have value for you while you're in the service, and then value when you leave, in that I don't know what my battalion commander from Iraq in 2005 is doing now. I have no idea where he is. I have no idea how I could get a hold of him. But if he was on rallypoint.com, I could look up and say, oh, wow, now he's an executive at IBM. Man, maybe I should give him a call. We should grab a beer. We should chat about the old days and then talk about what's ahead. he's going to want to put in a word for me or go to bat for me with people that he knows, that opens up a door and provides an opportunity that I would never otherwise have. So I think a network and building and leveraging networks is a subtle thing that overcomes a lot of the other traditional ways we look at veterans unemployment. And then the second one is mentorship. And it fits with a network. But if you don't have a network, how do you plug into one? There's a great group called American Corporate Partners. The website is acp-usa.org. And I know Sid Goodfriend. He's a former Wall Street banker who founded the organization, just felt like, hey, I want to do more for veterans as they transition home. And the concept is very simple. It's not a jobs bank. It's a mentorship program. So Fortune 500 companies pay money to be a part of the organization, and then their executives mentor veterans. So and they're all across the country. Look up their website. You'll see from Pepsi-Cola to Dell to everybody, Wall Street banks, everyone's sort of gotten on board. They pay to mentor veterans. And when you've got, I know the head of JP Morgan himself mentors a veteran. Well, that veteran's got an opportunity to ask questions, talk to him once a month, get to know who he knows. That's a one-on-one relationship. The private sector leader has ability to help someone who's served, and this person gets to tap into a network that he or she never had before. And so we like to highlight at Concerned Veterans for America private entities out there that are filling the gaps that government just can't do or can't do efficiently, where you provide sort of the soft skills or soft values that veterans can project from. Because the skills are there, the life experiences are there. That 26-year-old E6 that's coming out of the military should have 1,000 times the leg up on someone who's just gone to college and maybe churned for a couple of years. Not to take away from that, but the life experience of multiple deployments and leading men in combat is something that makes you grow up pretty quick. And if you arm that person with a network and the ability to do those things, it's a powerful concept. So I appreciate the other folks on the panel today. I think private organizations like CrossFit that are veterans working with other veterans is another really powerful way to do it. The vet-to-vet connection is a great way to do it. So Concerned Vets for America, we're trying to build an organization that also, I think the third aspect, and I had a little off track there, the third aspect I would mention is purpose, is a sense of purpose. And I think being successful in a private sector business and making a big profit is a sense of purpose, and a good one at that. But also I think what veterans oftentimes miss when they transition out is that sense of purpose. I'm home. What do I do next that's ever going to have the kind of value or the kind of mission or the kind of buy-in that I had when I was walking the streets of Fallujah and with a guy on my right and my left, and man, am I ever going to do anything like that? I think helping them plug into causes and activities that restore just a sense of purpose, I think is a pretty healthy way for vets to sort of transition in as well, in addition to the employment factors. So those are my thoughts.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Those were very informative, I think, thought-provoking comments. I think it's made us think about how we need to embrace some of this new technology, social media and the internet, to try to get the word out more. And sometimes I think we can have too much of a DC mentality. You know, there are veterans all across the United States that need to network and everything else. And some of the websites you gave, I think, offer opportunities for some of these veterans that don't have the luxury to come to some events like this. Brian.
Yeah, Pete, that was great. I think I'm probably going to hit on a lot of the same stuff that Pete talked about, but I want to put a slightly different spin on it. As somebody that came out of the military who had a skill set that was in demand and that paid fairly well, the field of human intelligence rarely sees any economic downturn. If you have that skill set, you can find work. And I think that that's true in a lot of kind of the niche specialties that the military trained you in, whether it's human intelligence or whether it's some kind of obscure electronic warfare. You can find these niches. I think that my message for any veterans out there, any veterans watching, is just, if you don't like what you're doing when you get out, don't stay there. Find the type of sense of purpose that Pete talked about. Find the kind of tribe that you want to be a part of and that gives you some meaning, because you are going to be dramatically underwhelmed going from a place like Fallujah, where I was in 2005, to going into, you know, swiping in your fob every morning, putting your CAT card in, and answering emails from your boss. You're going to go, why was I spending all my time getting shot at, and why did I go through all this training, and now this is the culminating years of my life. This is what I'm going to spend the remainder of my years on this earth doing. There are plenty of avenues out there for veterans to find something better to do. And so, you know, if you can find a great gig, even if you find a bad gig, use it as a stepping stone to something else, and find something that fulfills you, find something that challenges you. And, you know, the example that I'll give out of the gate is both something that you can do that will help you transition, and also a great place to find like-minded people, which is, it's very hard to do, you know. The number of people that serve in the military and have served overseas is something under 1% of the population. And so you go from this environment where you're surrounded by people that you can relate to and surrounded by people with the same experiences, and now you're walking the streets of Washington, D.C. or New York or wherever you are, and no one has a clue as to who you are and what you're about. But there are plenty of places out there that you can find people that are willing to help you and that you can feel like you fit in again. And as weird as this is going to sound, CrossFit gyms are a great place to do that. And a big part of that is because we screen out people that don't want to work hard. We screen out people that really are looking for a get fit quick or get results quick, that have that kind of mentality. The type of mentoring, the type of networking that goes on in my gyms is astounding. I tell people all the time, you know, Craigslist is great, but if you need a live chicken, a T-72 tank, and you know, within 24 hours, just post in my comments section, because somebody's probably A, got it, and B, willing to help you out. And this is just the kind of type of community that we find in CrossFit gyms, and also especially in CrossFit Walter Reed, which is a nonprofit gym that I run at a Walter Reed Military Medical Center that trains specifically wounded warriors, amputees, TBIs, guys suffering from PTSD. And I think that the beauty of situations like CrossFit gyms in general, like CrossFit Walter Reed, is that we're going to put you under a similar type of neurological stress that you found when you were training with and suffering with the people that you worked with in the military. You were under severe physical duress, right? You are getting stressors from the environment that are forcing you to adapt and overcome second by second. And you're going through this with a bunch of people that are right next to you and going through the same thing. And suddenly that bond happens, right? And it's the same thing that happens when you go through boot camp, is that you look around at these people and you go, this sucks, but at least I got these guys here. And you build that kind of bond that's going to carry you a very long way. And that, you know, might not be a CrossFit gym for you. It might be things like Rally Point, which are great organizations that are trying to help network veterans, put them together, give them that, you know, baseline of, hey, we have this same experience, let's work together, which comes out of that, right? When you have this type of stress you're put under, you want to work together, you're willing to work together. Every veteran that goes overseas, every veteran that sees some degree of combat or simply serves in these stressful positions, has a tremendous amount of ability and a tremendous amount of skill, and what I frequently see is them not utilizing it, them willing to settle for something that is not what they want to do and doesn't give them that purpose. But it seems to be what they are kind of processed through, right? It seems to be that that is their next logical step. And so what I encourage veterans to do is quit, right? Try something and don't be afraid to say, I quit. Right? I don't want to do this anymore. Don't be afraid to have a great idea and go, I'm going to roll with this, right? I accidentally opened a CrossFit gym in 2008. I had a very nice, lucrative human intelligence job where I, most of the time, got to go and drink my coffee and put in my cat card and answer emails. Occasionally deployed, but, you know, nothing too bad. The SEALs live fairly well in some of their deployments, and so that was fun. But you know, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to wake up every day, and I don't want to plug something into a cat card, and I don't want to answer emails. I want to try to help people if I can. This CrossFit thing seems cool, and ran with it. And it's given me a lot of opportunities to help veterans to be able to kind of reach people's lives and make them a little bit better every single day. And so, you know, the other added benefit is that this is the first time I put on a tie in about a year and a half. So I hope I tied it right. You know, most of the time it's either summer weight or winter weight board shorts is my uniform of the day. And there's jobs out there like that for veterans. And, you know, I think it helps everybody that people, you know, everybody here is here because they're concerned about veterans. Everybody here is here because they want to hire veterans. They want to help veterans find jobs that give them meaning. You know, and if you're doing that, great. But you know, I would also encourage everyone that's trying to hire veterans to tell them, you know, on their first day of the job, you don't have to stay here. You know, we are now in voluntary land. You know, you don't have to work for me. You know, you're not here for 3 years, and I'm not going to give you a bad fit rep if we don't get along. You can just quit. Go find what you want to do with your life, and go do it. Something that I'll be pimping out later in the reception is education is a huge part of this. And you see, you know, guys like Pete that went to Harvard. Somebody went to Kellogg. Yeah, Micah went to Kellogg. These are great programs. These are places where you're going to do meet the people that will help shape the rest of your life, and that's critically important as a veteran. I also want to say there are other places out there, if you don't necessarily fit into that mold, that will help you, A, find the type of thought-provoking educational experience that you need. You might not know you need it, but you need it. And will also help find you, again, those like-minded folks. I'm a graduate of St. John's College, and there is no place like it on earth, right? This is a place where literally we sit around and read Plato and talk about it. And not in kind of a hoity-toity, we're sitting around and we're, you know, like, you know, playing our lyres and singing Homer kind of thing. It's a bunch of people like we have today. It's veterans, it's non-veterans, it's teachers, it's, you know, just your usual undergrad to graduate student. And we all want to come together and we all want to talk about what are the things that make up the human soul. What are the things, what are the fundamental truths of justice and injustice? You know, what do these things mean, you know? We have a saying that reason bows to no authority. We are in there to figure out what is true. And places like that, you know, and I think that, you know, the quality of education that you're going to get at a Harvard or a Kellogg are trying to do the same thing, but in a what we call a techne fashion, right? They're trying to teach you how to do something and teach you how to fit into a world, right? That's where the folks want to go to. With St. John's, it is a place where you are going to figure out the world, right? Or at least figure out that you can't figure it out. We have a relatively new endeavor that I'm the co-founder of called the St. John's College Leadership Series. This is open to active duty, former active duty, anyone interested really in trying to find out what is this idea of the great books, and what is this idea of a class purely based on dialogue. Now, our class is run by a tutor. We don't call them professors because they're not there to profess at you. The tutor helps you learn, and they just ask a question at the beginning of our seminars. And they could go another 2 hours and not say a word. They're just going to listen to you talk. And to go from a military education system where in the beginning of class you have somebody that stands up and says, these are the 3 things I'm going to teach you. And then they spend an hour and you sit there trying to not fall asleep, and then at the end of the hour you perk up and you go, what were the 3 things again? Okay, that's going to be on the quiz, right? To have something out there like that is so contrary to the military educational hegemony, I think is hugely refreshing to anyone that wants to seek a different type of education. But also with the St. John's College Leadership Series, something that we're trying to do is influence the military education system. Now, this works similar to gravity, and the military education system is the sun. And we are a little asteroid outside of Plato, or outside of Pluto, right? So we're not pulling much, but we're pulling on each other, right? And so we offer these in-person and online seminars in the hope that, you know, the military, the participants, and the people responsible for constructing the military education system will look at this and go, wow, maybe we can do this a little bit differently. Maybe we're not asking the fundamental questions of what is it in the human spirit, what is in the human spirit that drives certain people to lead and certain people to follow? What is it in the human spirit that drives certain people to run to the sound of the boom and others to run away? These are the fundamental questions that I don't think are getting answered through the military education system. And we probably aren't going to answer them either, but we're at least going to ask the question, and we're going to help people figure out their own answers.
Thanks, Brian. And as I said in my introductory remarks, if you haven't already, make sure you learn a bit more about what Brian has done with CrossFit at the Heritage website, our blog roll, which is called The Foundry. It's fascinating stuff. And also, while you're on the internet, you might want to go in and Google St. John's College. After hearing that, I think I will after this. Next, Mike.
Thank you, Luke. I want to thank Luke for bringing us here today, and Fred and Concerned Veterans of America and the Heritage Foundation for bringing us here. As you heard in my biography that Luke put out, I work for Deloitte Consulting. I also run a nonprofit here in the DC area called Vets in Tech. And it's funny what Pete and Brian were just saying. I was jotting down some notes here. Both of them hit on the thing that Vets in Tech stands for the most, which is networking. I was just speaking to some veterans here about a week ago, and all of them asked, hey, you know, what's the most important thing about the job transition? And that, you know, I may not know right now. And without a doubt, it's networking. You don't get told that in your TAP classes and your transition classes. You get told, you know, how to go sign up for VA benefits. You get told where to go to hiring fairs, but they don't teach you about networking, and they don't teach you how to network. To a lot of us getting out of the military, the idea of networking is, oh, well, you know, I worked with this guy in the military, so he'll go get me a job, or I have this family member, so I can leverage that to get a job. That's what I call kind of the inner circle of networking. Then there are various rings around this. LinkedIn, you know, is great at calling it your first level of connection, your second level of connection, your third level of connection. And for people getting out of the military, they don't necessarily understand what that means and how to leverage that. I got a job at, you know, Deloitte Consulting when I got out, and it wasn't because I submitted my resume. Actually, I did submit my resume, and I never heard anything back. I then found a friend of my brother who worked at Deloitte and talked to him about the company and, you know, the benefits of the company, and then, you know, realized that kind of management consulting was something that I wanted to get into, and so then he submitted my resume through the internal referral system. So it's the networking aspect and learning how to leverage that network, and learning that going to, you know, coffee with someone who you basically got connected to through an email from a friend that you have nothing in common with other than he works in an industry or a company or something you want to go do. Ask that person to coffee, talk about the company that they work for, ask him if he knows other people at the company that would be interested in speaking to a veteran, talk about, you know, the experiences that they have there, talk about the experiences that you can bring to that company. It's those networking events that will then, you know, that one might not open up a door, but the next one might, and then one after that might. And it won't pay dividends in the first few times you do it. You need to learn how to casually network with people so that, you know, you don't really scare them with, hey, I'm going to go blow down doors, I'm going to go shoot guns and stuff of that nature. Not that I ever did that, but I appreciate everyone who did. So networking, number one. Number two for the veterans is know the skills that you have and translate those skills into commercial and corporate desires. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you did IT work in the Navy or IT work in the Marines, or, you know, human relations work, go find the certifications and accreditations that are out there that in most circumstances the military will pay for, and get those certifications, because that will add to your resume. One of the biggest challenges, or another big challenge that military service members have, which there are now starting to be, you know, online tools, is writing your resume and translating your military experience into an applicable experience an employer's looking for. There's no silver bullet for that. There's no, you know, military.com skills translator app that's going to work for you and do it perfectly. It's going to take time and time again showing your resume to friends, to peers, to some of the mentors that these guys talked about, and saying, hey, you know, what do you think about my resume? It's continually tweaking. That's one of the things we do with Vets in Tech, is we have resume nights, but where military veterans can come in, show their resumes to, you know, people, hiring managers at some of these companies. We did one actually with Deloitte, where we had some of the hiring managers in there, and they looked at military resumes for a lot of junior military officers, and they'll give you frank feedback in a lot of these circumstances. When you go for a job interview, unfortunately, you're not going to get frank feedback. You're either going to get a call back and get offered another interview or the job, or you're not going to know what it was in a lot of circumstances. So that's why you need to surround yourself with people that will tell you the truth. In a lot of circumstances, you know, in the military, they're very good at that. People tell you what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, how to improve. It turns out the civilian world is not that way. You are your own boss. there's not a career path. I mean, every one of these guys got out, and if you asked them when they were in the military, hey, did you think I was going to open a CrossFit gym? No. I mean, there is a very hierarchical career path in the military when you get out, unless you go work for a large company that has those hierarchical career paths and milestones. You're not going to find that. It's just a lot more fluid situation, and quite frankly, veterans have to learn how to embrace that in order to succeed. The last point that I'll make for veterans is you need to find out what your driver is in your professional aspirations. And for everyone, it's going to be something different. My brother actually quit his job. He wasn't a veteran. Quit his job right when I was getting out of the military, so we were both unemployed together. We went down to my dad's house in North Carolina and went fishing most days. But when we weren't fishing, we were both actively conducting our job searches. And it was great to have another person who had nothing similar in their background other than an engineering degree to have this discussion with, because I found out it brought to light the fact that every one of us is different. Every one of us has different drivers. My driver was being challenged. My brother's driver was being in a field where it stimulated his intellectual curiosity. He works with NASA right now, and I'm in management consulting. So I'm challenged every day because I get put in different scenarios and I get different problem sets thrown at me that there may or may not be a clear answer to, and that's what drives me. What drives him, is working on space shuttles and doing flight dynamics and whatever those guys with 1,000-pound brains do. But those were our drivers. For other people, it might be location. It might be, number of people that work for me. It might be the salary that I make. And there's nothing wrong with any of those. If you're someone who wants to go make, $250,000, that's great. But if that's your driver, figure it out. And don't pick the same driver as the guy right next to you. Really do some thinking about what makes you happy in life and try and identify that. One of the biggest problems with veterans is we go to jobs and, I can only quote for Deloitte, but approximately, the retention is 18 months for a military veteran at a company like Deloitte. That's how long they last, on average. Some leave less, some leave, this month, knock on wood, made it to my 18-month mark, so I'm still there. But military veterans are usually, for some odd reason, and I think it's because we don't have that we don't take the time to do that introspective look. We go take jobs for some variety of reasons that, we're generally not happy with after a year or so. So actually take some time, and by all means, you don't have to hit it out of the park the first time, but it will help for the second and third job that you take down the line if you have that conversation with yourself before you go to that first job, while you're at the first job. If you decide to quit the first job, great, but continually analyze yourself and realize what you're good at and what you're not good at and what you're happy with and what you're not happy with. From the corporate side, just a couple of things. Every corporation's different. Every corporation has a different corporate culture, and that's obviously one of the things veterans need to look at when they're going to a company. But from the corporate side, they need to, a lot of corporations that come to Vets in Tech, because we at Vets in Tech, we focus on technology, building a technology network here in the DC area, from employment, entrepreneurship, and education assistance. And so from the employment aspect, a lot of companies come to us because they're looking to hire veterans. And the first question that I always ask these companies is, well, what type of veteran do you want? And they say, well, I want veterans. Well, that's great, but from the Navy perspective, the bosun's mate who is responsible for painting the ship is a heck of a lot different of an individual than someone like myself who operated nuclear reactors on aircraft carriers. We bring completely different skill sets to the table, and depending on what that company is, you need different skills. Yes, a lot of that is in the resume, and you can determine that in the resume, but a lot of it are the soft skills that, in a lot of circumstances we're hired for. because, you know, as military veterans, we don't go to a company and we don't have the perfect skill set, you know, unless you go into human intelligence or something of that nature where you did the same thing in the military. You know, if I would have gone and operated a civilian nuclear power plant, those skills are very transferable. But in a lot of circumstances, we're hired for our leadership ability and our management ability, which are those soft skills, where I, as a naval officer, am going to have different leadership and management skills than someone who was in the on the battlefield in, you know, Fallujah or Iraq. So the companies need to look at themselves and decide what veteran fits in best for them and what veterans they want to go after, and then they can craft their recruiting strategy and kind of all those things off of that. Secondly, for companies, a point that I brought up before, the average retention rate for military veterans. A lot of companies right now call it a fad, call it realization of actually how great veterans are, but you're hearing a lot of press about companies going out and wanting to hire veterans, which, you know, I think is great for us veterans. But the flip side of that is a lot of companies are hiring veterans, but they don't know how to employ veterans, which is a complex problem. It's a problem, as I mentioned, that my current company struggles with, and I actually work on an internal initiative there, trying to develop our programs to increase our retention rates for veterans, because for a variety of reasons, veterans leave these companies, whether or not it's that sense of purpose that you heard these guys talk about before. You know, if I'm making money for my company, but I'm not saving people's lives, maybe, you know, or I'm not defending national security, maybe that's not the purpose. So it's an individualized answer, and it depends on whatever company you have, you know, the purpose of your company. But you need to look at, you know, establishing programs for veterans to support other veterans. That's the biggest thing we found is creating, you know, the internal business resource groups for veterans to be mentored by other veterans, for veterans to have, you know, the peer groups where if they're having, you know, problems with superiors, that, you know, in the military there's a certain way you deal with it, but in a lot of circumstances that doesn't translate directly over to the civilian world. So with that, kind of the last point is one that I touched on a little bit earlier, is that veterans, we have to take the onus upon ourselves to drive our careers in the avenue that we want to proceed. And what I mean by that is, you know, there's no one that's telling you what to do. There's no one telling you to go network with all these people. It's really up to the veterans to kind of step out of the box in a lot of circumstances and find those people that they want to make connections with, and find the careers and the jobs that they feel will interest them, and go after those jobs. Because they're not, quite frankly, in a lot of the very highly desirable jobs are not necessarily out recruiting heavily. You have to seek them out, and you have to, you know, do the informational interviews with the people that work there and have coffee with the people that work there. You know, I wanted to go work at a company which I don't work at right now, and I think I probably did 5 to 10 informational interviews, did one interview and was told that I wasn't technical enough to work there, but I knew that I wanted to work for that company, and so I went after it. But it ultimately didn't pan out, you know, but you can't fault yourself unless you try. So the last thing that I'll talk about today is a little bit about the nonprofit that I work for here in the DC area, Vets in Tech, as you've heard me mention before. We started up back in 2013 here in DC. We're a national organization and have launched some pretty cool initiatives to help veterans get integrated into technology, whether that's I want to start up a company in technology, whether that's I want to go work for a big tech firm, or I just want to learn about some tech stuff. So our company is a nonprofit. We're founded out in San Francisco about 2 years ago, and we recently in November expanded nationally to DC, New York, Austin, San Diego, LA, and Portland, Oregon, and have the basis of our organization is exactly this networking aspect. We build localized networks here in the various cities where we host events. Out in San Francisco last week, we actually just hosted an event where we launched a venture capital education/fund geared specifically towards veterans. So in the first year of it, it'll be very focused on the education aspect for entrepreneurs on where to go raise money, whether it's venture capital, whether it's angel investor, whether it's a small business association, those things. So here in the DC area, that's my shameless plug for Vets in Tech. You can find us at vetsintech.co, or you can join our DC specific meetup page for Vets in Tech, and get notifications about the various events going on and or a lot of the companies that are looking to hire vets. Just last week I got an email from, I want to say it was Accenture. They're starting a program to provide free of charge base level technical programming to veterans, and once you complete a certification through that company, then they guarantee that you'll get at least an interview with their company for an entry-level IT type job. So there's a lot of companies out there running great programs. It's just kind of figuring it out and navigating the land. That's what Mike and I were actually talking about earlier, is how many people are out there trying to help veterans, and it's just kind of trying to find the right people for you, depending on what you want to get into. So, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. And make sure you check out Vets in Tech. In Washington, D.C., there's no such thing as a shameless plug.
Not a local
everyone's
yet.
doing it. All the shameless self-promotions, a shameless plug. But yeah, thanks for that. And, I thought it was the point you made about veterans need to be self-starters is a particularly important one. A lot of often in the military, you're told, what you need to wear, where you need to be, what you need to do, and you sort of get ingrained in this. And I remember, when I left the Army and I was transitioning into the civilian world, I found that a particular challenge, waking up and having a mission for the day, being a self-starter. And I remember when I got my first job interview, I realized, I thought to myself, well, what do I wear? I don't have a suit. I had no need for a suit. I haven't worn a suit in years. And, you have to think about these little things when you're transitioning out of the military into the civilian sector. Our next speaker will offer a unique perspective on the panel, I think, because he's technically still in the military, but he's very much working, I would say, in the civilian capacity. So perhaps Micah could offer some insights into this.
Sure, I'll try. Luke, and I'll keep my first of all, by your intro, it sounds like I'm a lot older than I really am after listing all those jobs. So I'm really only 29.
Just distinguished.
29.
Just distinguished.
Yeah. So I also do the obligatory disclaimer. Like you said, I am still an active duty officer, and everything I say here is just my opinion. Doesn't reflect the Navy nor the office of Senator McCain. Luckily, you've heard from these three distinguished gentlemen, so I'll be able to be brief here. I do think the most valuable things out of these events are the question and answer portions and in the networking portion afterwards. We get a chance to talk to one another. Who knows, we might be making a connection today by people who are just sitting in the audience. So I just want to touch on four basic tenets. And that the first one is to know yourself. The second is to know your story. The third is to know your target or targets. And lastly is it's network or no work. So by knowing yourself is there's no one out there who's going to be able to tell you really what you should be doing next. Everyone, you've maybe taken these Myers-Briggs tests. You can go to like a careerleader.com or betterweekdays.com offers a free assessment tool that you can log on and figure out what am I really good at, what do I like to do. Because when I was, in 2012, I was considering transitioning out of the Navy, and for multiple reasons I'm still here. But there was an exercise I did with a career coach that kind of stuck with me. And it was listing your talents in a column and giving yourself listing your skills in a column. And when you add those two together, that makes your strengths. And when you combine your strengths with your passion, that's what's going to equal success. So if you don't take the time to really figure out what your strengths are and what your skills are, and then you take the time to figure out what are you really passionate about, you're probably never going to succeed, because you're going to keep on pursuing a job that maybe you're not passionate about, or maybe you're passionate about, but you don't have the skills lined up to do it. So take the time to know yourself. Second is to know your story. We don't do the greatest job of knowing our 30-second pitch. We may have that ready. We don't always do the best job of translating our military careers into how it can help an organization, translate into civilian terms. And so you really have to kind of know your story. The third thing is to know your target or targets. If you're not spending at least 10 times the amount of time you're going to have in this interview doing research about that company, including the people you're going to talk to, you're setting yourself up for failure. So you really have to know not only that organization, but the industry that it's in, the different trends in that industry, who its competitors are, do a kind of a SWOT analysis. That's the only way to really prepare for interviews and looking at different industries and sectors. And last, and most importantly, is we've talked about networking. Networking is not this, dirty word that sometimes we think about in the military. And the fact of the matter is upwards of 80% of people get their jobs by networking. If you just put your job into monster.com, upload it to any number of the USA jobs, the chances of you getting the job is not nearly as good as it is if you have a personal connection. Mike spoke to that point, and I think probably everyone here has a similar situation they could point to. So it's really about those strength of loose ties. It's not your best friend who's going to hire you, but maybe it's your best friend's neighbor, or it's your uncle's coworker, or something like that. So you never really know who that person or who that connection is going to be. So that's why you always have to be ready to have that 30-second pitch, that resume that's updated, having a business card on you. It doesn't have to have your current job, but just has your name, contact information, how they can get a hold of you. You wouldn't believe some of the situations or the places where people have gotten jobs. I've known people at concerts have gotten them, county fairs, you name it. That's people got to be available and ready to have those conversations. And lastly, as I mentioned about the networking piece, I'm involved in a group called the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum. It's something that started last year by a mutual friend from a couple of us here, and a couple of members here in the audience were at the kickoff or inaugural event in Chicago last fall. It was a group that started because we kind of realized that good creative ideas aren't constrained by pay grade or service, and there's kind of an abundance of cognizant ability that transcends some of the parochial interests that are involved in the military. And so getting people together in one room and having them connect on a personal level beyond the online forums where we may know people's handles from the blogosphere, but getting them in the same room, we really saw it as a catalyst to good ideas and moving forward. So afterwards, in the other room, I've got a flyer, but it's defenseentrepreneurs.org, and the next event will be at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business the weekend of October 24th there in Chicago. So I'll be talking more about that later. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Micah. We now have some time for a few questions before we break and head out to the reception. We do have a microphone. If you have a question, if you could please raise your hand. If you could state your name and your organization. And then, so any... okay, well then I will take the opportunity to ask the first question as the moderator. Can anyone on the panel speak about what might have changed or not has changed in the past few years with helping those who are transitioning out of the military transition into the civilian workforce? I know that it's been a while since most of this panel, including myself, that had to do the transition process. But dealing with veterans who are looking for employment, have you come across any curiosities or anything you thought warrants particular attention with the transition process from any of the vets you've spoken with?
I think when I came in to the civilian world, and this is 2006, it was fairly easy to transition into defense contracting. A lot of folks, that was the big draw, and a lot of folks came here to the capital city and could find a decent paying job in doing something that they were fairly qualified to do. I think as we've seen a significant drying up of that contracting world, You find either a lot of folks that are just end up back in the hometown where they grew up, where there's not going to be the same level of opportunity for networking, opportunity to find new jobs. And so that's one big change. And then the other big change is because of that, a lot of folks are looking at grad school and saying, okay, well, I'll just get a bit more qualified. I'll go get my MBA. I'll go get a graduate degree in some kind of STEM field to make me more qualified to find, these, less number of jobs that are out there. As of the first one, I'm from a small town called Rising Sun, Maryland, exit 100 up I-95, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So it wasn't a big draw to go back there, and so my warning to veterans that are thinking about getting out or that have recently gone out is don't go home. There is nothing for you there, and I do a good amount of mentoring for folks that are going through this process, and both for people that are getting out of the military and also people that are looking to go into the military. The Naval Academy is a big draw for a lot of people. Going into the military is a big draw for a lot of people. And my advice to most of those guys is don't go. Because I see the next kind of great adventure for the next generation is not necessarily the military. It's just get out of the U.S. Go somewhere else. And if you come back, great. But what you're going to then have is you're going to be actually interesting. Because so many folks go through the kind of one path that Micah was talking about. This kind of the parochial interests in the military are going to try to shuttle you into one path. Parochial interests in Washington, D.C. are going to shuttle you into a couple different paths. And if you don't fit into those paths, you're not necessarily going to be as attractive, so we think, to potential employers. I think this is completely wrong. I think that when I look at resumes for different projects I have going on, different businesses, when I've talked to other business owners, when I've talked to people in defense industry and government, what they really want to see is somebody different. And so, you are much better off in going, forget it, I'm going to Singapore for a year. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll just hang out and I'll hustle.
Work
and
for
so,
Fat Leonard.
Sorry?
Work for Fat Leonard.
Work for somebody. Work for somebody that nobody's heard of but is interesting. I have a senior intern because he's been interning me for 4 years. So I promoted him. He didn't get a raise.
Vice president.
Vice president of interns. And he's a kid from George Mason. He loves CrossFit, so he comes in the summer and he will do any kind of work that I want him to do. His older brother was a former infantry officer in the Marines, and Andrew, my senior intern, wanted to be a SEAL. And so, I told him about what it was like to be a SEAL, and I told him, hey, you probably don't want to do that, and, you should go find something different. Go do something different, Andrew. Go to Hong Kong and just hustle. Go figure it out. Even if it's not Hong Kong, go to San Francisco. Figure it out. Go hustle. And those, you build the soft skills, and you maybe build some hard skills that you didn't know you were made for, but that you can, find out in those types of challenging ways, as opposed to, I'm going to go to the military, I'm going to get my, maybe some education paid for, I'm going to learn a trade, I'm going to go get a job. Like, there are a million of you out there that are just like, and I'm one of them, that are just like that, right? So go do something different. And as to the education piece, look at something that you want to do, right? If you are passionate about going to business school and learning, I want to learn how to solve problems, I want to learn how to organize, I want to learn how to lead. Business school is a great place to do that. But if you're like, I don't know, if you're not interested in that, don't do it, right? Go to something like St. John's. Go to wherever you want to go, right? Go find an educational experience that's going to be personally rewarding to you, and I think the right job will follow from that. But I think that's been the big change in both, the job market and the education system in the 8 years that I've been a quasi-civilian and Marine reservist.
Great.
Yeah, one other thing I'd say, Luke, that's changed, and maybe not in the past couple of years, because when I got out 3 or 4 years ago now, it was still similar, but if you got out 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been, is the use of, online networking tools, online research of the companies, that you want to go hire or want to be hired by, things such as LinkedIn, things such as militaryjobs.com. There's just a ton of resources out there that are geared towards helping sometimes it's specifically veterans get into these different professions. And then every day that goes by, there's a different program that gets announced. There's a different grant that gets announced. There's different loan opportunities that get announced specifically towards veterans. I think recently there was a Small Business Administration basically had like zero financing or something for $350,000 if you want to go start a business. So, I mean, every day that goes by, there's different programs that come out for veterans.
Well, no, it definitely is technology. It opens up the wider world, so you don't have to go, if you want to go back home, great. If you don't want to, you know what else is out there with the opportunity to do that. I would also, the only thing I would caution is that sometimes veterans get caught up in seeing technology as that silver bullet. It's another jobs portal. It's another social media application that you can plug your stats into and it pushes something back out. And that minimizes what the hard work that goes into building relationships, because it is, as everyone talked about, the human relationships. The technology is something to leverage that I think opens up the ability for better human relationships.
Thank you. And to add to what was just said, the point about not going back to your hometown, I'm also from very middle of the nowhere type place in rural Missouri, and something I would add to that is have some sort of plan if you know you're going to get out, and for those first for the first couple of months, and also this is just a personal recommendation. I would stay away from huge lengths of transition leave from ETS, I think it's called in the Army, where you're getting out and you have like 90 days of vacation saved up, and then you go home and you sit around for 90 days, and then all of a sudden the 91st day comes and you're not getting paid, and you think, gosh, what have I been doing for the last quarter of the year? So keep the momentum up, keep going. Have a plan and go for it. I think, we'll take this one question and then we will break for the event, and then we can continue the discussion outside. Sir, if you could please say your name and your organization.
I'm Charles Busick, and I run the Busick Group. It's a small international consulting firm. But because of my relationship here in Washington, D.C., I end up mentoring several different military folks coming out of the military. And they're usually the 05, 06 level, even the 07 level. And those folks that made the commitment to stay in for 20 years or 30 years, they're in yet another unique group of veterans, because they're at a point where when they go, and if it's not the defense industry, they want to go meet with a potential employer, and the guy says, geez, you're 42 or you're 52, and it's not so much the age, it's the experience. I just wondered if the panel's got any thoughts on those folks, because if we can't convince a certain group of those, and I'm just in this point addressing the officers and the senior non-commissioned officers to stay in for 20 or 30 years, then that's also going to degrade our ability to maintain a strong force. But if they say, well, I can't stay in past 10 years, because if I stay past 10, I can't get a job in the private sector in the 21st century as we become more sophisticated in the business field. So, any thoughts?
I'll start, because I'm in that boat, or will be, figuratively and literally. I've been in for almost 14 years, and you get to that one point where you're like, well, I've been in long enough, I gotta do my 20, and first of all, I hate that term because it sounds like more of a prison sentence than you serving your country. But no, you got to run the numbers, one thing, and two, it's definitely a very different challenge. Trying to transition as a senior leader, someone who's at post command or maybe post major command in many cases, going into an organization where you used to be the head honcho of the organization, and now you've got to face the reality of you may be working for a 35-year-old and you're 52 because of that different experience in that sector. However, we all talked about the intangibles of the veteran and what they bring to the table, and I don't think that changes the older that you get or the more experience you have in the military, but it makes it more critical to be able to, that story, to be able to translate those skills that you've acquired in management and leadership, and how you can apply those to that particular company. How can you show your value and show that you're not been totally programmed, you can only think like a military officer or senior non-commissioned officer. So I think it's very important to show that I'm not this rigid colonel or lieutenant colonel or commander who only knows military, but I can connect with civilians as well, maybe grow out your hair just a little bit, and you know, put them on their heels, because they're going to be expecting you to call, you know, come in with a buzz cut and start barking out orders. But you just can't do that in today's work environment.
Great. All right. I think we will end it there for this part anyhow. If everyone could join me in giving our panelists a round of applause. Thank you, everyone, for all you do to help veterans out. I know it's highly appreciated by those that you are helping, and especially as we approach the Memorial Day weekend, you know, it takes on even more meaning. So thank you very much. If you're interested in watching this again, it'll be online at heritage.org in about 24 hours. I think I'm told. Usually it takes that long. So check it out there. And in the meantime. Please, on your way out, stop by, grab a drink, some food, and have a chat. Network. Thanks.